They found the first shoe half buried in sand, still tied, still dry enough to look staged. It was 2017 on the north end of Cumberland Island, Georgia, on a day that started clean and ended with 3 people missing and 1 responder dead. We moved fast because the tide erases a beach the way a broom erases a floor, and the last ferry back to St. Mary's does not wait for explanations. I'm writing this as a fictionalized case study reconstruction, the kind we use in training when we want the lesson to land without dragging real families through it again. The location is real. The terrain is real. The decisions are real. The names are not, and any resemblance is coincidence. What matters is how quickly a normal search can turn into a controlled environment when someone on the ground wants control more than distance. That morning, the call came through our coordinator a little after 10 a.m. 2-day hikers, a couple in their 20s, had taken the first ferry over and never checked in for the last return. That detail sounds small until you remember Cumberland is not a roadside park. You don't drift off it and wander home. You either make the boat or you start spending time in a place that gets very dark under live oak and palmetto. I was 34 and already tired in the way that doesn't fix with sleep. I worked search and rescue alongside Camden County, mostly trail call-outs and water assists, mostly situations where people wanted to be found and were embarrassed about it. Cumberland was different, not because it was exotic, but because it was simple. It's an island with limited exits, limited roads, and long stretches where you can hear your own breathing. That simplicity makes people overconfident, including responders. We put together a hasty team with 4 of us as the core. Me, Eli, on the SR side. Deputy Ray McAllister, steady and procedural, the kind of deputy who spoke like he was already writing his report. Ranger June Harrow, National Park Service, who knew the island's rhythms and which shortcuts were actually dead ends. And Winston Bell, volunteer medic, a man who carried more gear than most people carry sense, and still managed to stay calm. We met at the St. Mary's dock before noon. The sun hit hard off the river, and the air had that clean salt smell that makes you feel like the day can't turn. The ferry operator watched us load packs and radios and said nothing, but his eyes tracked our equipment the way people's eyes do when they know the island can be beautiful and still be unforgiving. Ray ran the quick brief without calling it a brief. He checked radios, checked water, checked that everyone had a light and a backup light. He asked June for the last known point and the couple's plan, and June answered with the specific irritation of someone who has heard, "We just wanted quiet," too many times. They signed the register at Sea Camp, June said. Asked about the north end. They wanted empty beach. Winston looked past us toward the tree line across the water, the darker strip behind the marina buildings, and shook his head once. "Empty doesn't stay empty," he said, like he'd learned that line the hard way. On the ferry ride over, I ran the basics again, because that's what you do when you don't want to think about the part you can't control. 2 missing. No storms, no medical alerts, no confirmed sightings after the sign-in. Spotty cell coverage. Hot day. High humidity. Sunsets later in summer, but under canopy it goes dim early, and if someone steps off a trail they can lose their sense of direction faster than they admit. June sat across from me with a folded map, tapping lightly at a section and then stopping herself, as if she remembered I hated nervous habits. "There's an old service road up north," she said. "Closed to the public. Old maintenance structures. No reason for visitors, but people wander anyway." Ray looked at me across the aisle. "You ever worked this island?" "Once," I said. "Lost fisherman. He walked in circles until he hit the beach." Ray nodded like that confirmed what he already believed, which was that people do predictable things until somebody makes them do something else. We docked at Sea Camp and moved out with purpose. June led through palmetto and live oak, Spanish moss hanging in loops that look soft until you brush them and realize they snag. The humidity rose under the trees like someone turned up a dial. Bugs found our ears and stayed there. The island's beauty is not delicate. It presses on you. We checked the Sea Camp register box near the trail area. June unlocked it and pulled the notebook. The missing hikers' names were there in neat handwriting, 2 signatures, and a time that lined up with the first ferry. Underneath, a 3rd entry sat by itself. No name and no time, just 2 words pressed hard enough to dent the page. "Look north." Ray stared at it, then at June, and I watched his jaw set in that way it does when the environment stops being passive. "Who wrote that?" he asked. June shook her head. "That box stays locked. Only staff have keys." Winston leaned in and squinted like he could read intention through paper. "Could be a kid," he said. "Could be someone trying to be helpful." Ray didn't answer Winston, which was its own answer. He took a photo with his phone, had June lock the box again, and then he turned us north as if he'd already decided the message wasn't random. We started up the main track and cut to narrower paths where the vegetation closes in. We moved in a stagger, not dramatic, just practical. June took point because she knew what looked normal. Ray stayed center, keeping line of sight on both of us. Winston watched our rear because medics learn quickly that the rear is where you lose people, and I floated where I could see everyone and scan the margins. About an hour in, we found the first sign that didn't fit the island's normal language. A strip of bright survey tape hung from a branch at shoulder height. It wasn't placed like a trail marker. It was placed like a hand reaching out. The knot was clean. The tape was fresh. No sun fade, no fraying. It looked like it had been tied within hours. June stopped and frowned. "Nobody marks like this," she said. "Not staff, not volunteers." Ray raised his radio. "Base, this is McAllister. We found non-standard tape markers north of Sea Camp. Any maintenance crews working in this area today?" The reply came late and thin, the kind of transmission you get when you're asking a portable radio to do a job it doesn't want to do. "No crews," dispatch said. "No scheduled work." Winston pointed down, and I followed his finger to the sand. There was a dragged line, a straight scrape through light sand and crushed grass, like something heavy had been pulled off trail and then pulled back again. The line cut through the brush as if someone had decided the brush didn't get a vote. Ray looked at me. "We follow it," he said. I didn't like it. The drag line felt like an invitation, and invitations on searches are rarely offered in good faith. But we were here for missing people, and in the early hours you take the clearest lead because you don't have the luxury of pride. The drag mark led toward the beach. The trees opened, the light changed, and the sound of the ocean came in steady and indifferent. Dunes rose ahead, pale and soft, sea oats bent in the wind. When we stepped onto the open sand, the heat hit us like we'd left shade and entered a different county. That's where we found the shoe. Half buried, still tied. A cheap sneaker you could buy anywhere, and that was part of what made it unsettling. It was a familiar object placed in an unfamiliar context, clean enough to look planted. Winston crouched and didn't touch it. "Any chance it washed up?" he asked. "Not like that," June said. "Not that clean, not still tied." Ray took out an evidence bag and slid the shoe in with controlled hands, keeping it professional and also keeping it from becoming a relic we stared at too long. I scanned the dune line and the tree line beyond it, expecting movement because that's what your brain does when you feel watched. I didn't see anyone. That didn't make me feel better. 10 yards ahead, a flashlight lay in the sand with its lens scraped white, like it had been dragged face down. The beam was still on, pointing into empty sand. That meant fresh batteries. That meant recent. I looked at Ray. "Who leaves a light on like that?" I asked. Ray didn't answer. He lifted a hand for quiet and took 2 careful steps toward it, placing his boots where the sand looked undisturbed. That was when we heard the voice. Not from the beach, not from the trees, from somewhere in the dunes, where every rise breaks sight lines and distance lies. "Hey," the voice called. "Over here." It was a man's voice, calm, normal, not yelling, not panicked. The tone you'd expect from someone trying to be helpful, which is exactly why it wasn't helpful. Ray answered the way he always did, because his instincts were trained and reliable. "Sir, identify yourself," he called. A pause, just long enough to feel intentional. "I'm with them," the man said. "They're back here." Winston leaned close to me and whispered, "With who?" The man spoke again, and my stomach tightened because he used the missing hikers' first names, both of them, as if he'd practiced saying them. "They're hurt," he said. "Bring water." June took a small step forward and stopped herself, like her body moved before her brain finished warning her. "That's not how a witness talks," she said under her breath. "That's how someone leads you." Ray keyed his radio. "Base, we have a possible contact. Male voice in dunes. Request park law enforcement and additional units. The radio answered, but not from base. The voice that came through was clean and low, and it didn't match any dispatch voice we knew. It didn't have the urgency of someone trying to help. It had the flatness of someone delivering information like a courtesy. "Do not crest the dune," the voice said. "Turn back." Ray froze for a fraction of a second. June's face tightened, and I saw her go pale in the way people do when something familiar turns wrong. "That's our channel," June said quietly. "That's not our dispatcher." Ray keyed up again. "Identify," he said. The reply came immediately, almost too fast, like someone was waiting with a finger on the button. "You're being placed," the voice said. "He wants you separated." Winston looked at me, his eyes suddenly wide and very awake. "Is someone on our frequency?" he asked. I scanned the dunes again, and this time I wasn't scanning for a body. I was scanning for a mind, a person who understood how to use terrain, how to use sound, how to use our own urgency against us. Ray motioned us closer. "We stay tight," he said. "No one goes over anything blind. We don't chase voices." The man in the dunes spoke again, and he sounded closer now, as if he'd moved while we talked. "Don't leave them," he called. "They don't have much time." June hissed, "He's moving." Ray pointed at me. "You and June angle left," he said. "Stay low. Find a sight line. Winston stays with me." June and I moved as a pair, keeping our profiles low, sand giving under our boots. We approached the left shoulder of a dune where the sea oats were thicker. There was a cut in the grass, a narrow lane where the plants had been pressed down, and the sand there looked packed, not natural. June leaned close. "He's made a path," she whispered. We edged forward and looked down the other side. The dune dropped into a shallow bowl of sand and scrub. At the far end, under a cluster of low trees, something dark lay in the shade. For a second, my brain tried to label it as gear, because gear is easier than what it was. Then I saw the shape of an arm, too still, too pale against sand. June inhaled and stopped herself from making noise. I kept my eyes moving, because if there was one body, there could be someone watching how we reacted to it. Ray and Winston came up behind us, careful, and Ray's posture told me he'd already decided we weren't stepping down into that bowl. "What is it?" Winston whispered. June answered without looking away. "Body," she said. "Not ours." Ray's voice stayed controlled, the way it does when he's trying not to give an unseen person anything. "We do not rush in," he said. "We do not step where we can't see." And that was when Winston did what medics do, even when they're told not to. He took one careful step forward to find a way down that didn't feel like a trap. His boot sank an inch and stopped hard, like it had hit something that shouldn't be there. Winston shifted his weight to free it, and I saw the moment he realized the sand had a bite. There was a quick snap, not loud, just sudden, like tension releasing. Winston's leg jerked, his balance went. He dropped forward into the sand with a shout that cut off fast, more shock than pain at first. Ray moved like he was stepping through glass. "Don't move," Ray said. "Don't pull." Winston's hands found my wrist and clamped down, and his grip was tight enough to communicate what his voice didn't want to. "Get it off," he said. "Please." I looked down and saw enough to understand without needing the details. A concealed, man-made device had been buried under the sand. Not for animals, not for erosion control, but for a boot. It had been placed with intention, in a lane that guided a person's foot to the exact spot. June backed up, her face tight. "This isn't for wildlife," she said. "This is for us." Ray spoke into his radio, voice flat and professional, the only tone that keeps panic from becoming contagious. "Emergency," he said. "Responder injured by concealed device. Request immediate medical evacuation and park law enforcement to Sea Camp. Repeat, immediate." This time dispatch answered, but the signal wavered and broke in spots. Distance and tree cover did what they always do on islands, making every transmission feel like it has to fight through leaves. Ray looked at me. "Eli, you watch the dune line," he said. "June, get to open beach and guide them in. Winston stays still." That was how my name entered that day, like an assignment and also like a mistake waiting to happen. June moved off fast, staying on her own footprints, because now we believed every patch of sand could be a decision someone else had made. Ray knelt beside Winston and used his knife to free fabric and relieve pressure without yanking anything, his hands steady in the way steady hands can save a life. Winston breathed in short, controlled pulls, his jaw set like he refused to give the island the satisfaction of hearing him. I stood over them, scanning left and right, trying to see what a person would do next if he was building a scene. I didn't have to wonder long. A figure rose on a dune crest 50 yards away, half silhouetted in sunlight, holding something long in his hands. From that distance, it could have been a tool, a piece of driftwood, anything. What mattered was that he was showing himself, and he was doing it on his terms. Ray saw him and drew his sidearm. "Stop!" Ray shouted. "Show your hands!" The figure didn't comply. He took a step back and slid down the far side of the dune, disappearing as smoothly as if the island had swallowed him. Winston said, through clenched teeth, "He's circling us." Ray's eyes stayed on the dune crest. "He's testing us," Ray said. "He wants one of us to chase." I didn't chase, because chasing is what people do when they want to feel in control and aren't. I stayed with Winston and Ray, because leaving our injured medic felt like handing the unseen man exactly what he wanted. Minutes dragged, the sun shifted, the sand reflected heat back up into our faces. Winston's breathing grew shallower, not dramatic, just controlled in the way people breathe when they're trying to stay conscious without making it everyone else's problem. "Stay with me," Ray told him. Winston nodded once, then swallowed and said, "If I pass out, don't let me roll." Ray acknowledged it with a tight nod, and I recognized the tone of a man running a mental checklist faster than he could say it out loud. A radio crackle came from Ray's chest, and it wasn't the broken, distant sound of dispatch. It was clean again, that same unknown voice. "He's behind the driftwood," it said. Ray snapped his head toward the beach edge, where a long log lay washed up near the grass line. There was a dark gap behind it, a place a person could crouch and disappear. I brought my own radio up. "Who is this?" I asked, keeping my voice level, because level voices sometimes force level answers. A pause. "Someone who's seen his work," the voice said. "He has more set. He wants you to step wrong." Ray didn't waste words. "June, confirm your position," he called into his radio, and a moment later, June's voice came in broken, telling us she was on open sand and had visual on an approaching boat. Ray looked at me and lowered his voice. "You go wide right," he said. "Don't close distance, just get eyes, and watch your feet." I moved along the edge where dry sand meets darker, damp sand, because that boundary shows disturbances better. I kept my steps measured and my eyes scanning for anything that looked too straight, too deliberate. Behind the driftwood, I found what the voice had warned about, not the man himself, but another concealed hazard, the kind that turns urgency into injury. I backed off without stepping into it, and I looked back toward Ray and Winston. Winston's face had gone gray in a way I didn't like. June was a thin figure down the beach, waving a signal mirror into the sky like she was trying to catch the sun and throw it at help. And that's when the man made his next move. He didn't come from the dunes this time. He came from the tree line behind us, where we'd assumed open sand made us safe. He ran straight at June, fast and low, using the uneven line of beach grass as cover until the last second. June saw him and stumbled back, sand sliding under her boots. She got one hand up, more reflex than defense. Ray shouted and raised his weapon. The man threw something small and heavy. It struck June high and knocked her down. Not a blade and not a bullet, but a compact metal tool wrapped in cloth, thrown with the calm precision of someone who had practiced disabling people without leaving obvious evidence. I sprinted toward June, but I didn't sprint blind. I watched my steps, because now every patch of sand felt like a question. The man turned his head toward me, and I saw his face for the first time. Middle-aged, sunburned, unshaven. Not dramatic, not monstrous. Just a person who looked like he'd stopped living among other people and had stopped caring about consequences. He pulled a short knife, kept it low, and angled it toward June as she tried to crawl backward. Ray fired into the sand in front of him as a warning, a hard choice made in a fraction of a second. The man didn't flinch. He looked at Winston, still down and vulnerable, then back at June. His expression didn't read like rage. It read like patience. I grabbed June by her vest straps and dragged her backward a few feet, keeping her low. The man stepped forward with measured confidence, as if he believed we wouldn't shoot, and maybe he was right more often than he was wrong. Ray fired again, and this time it wasn't a warning. The shot caught the man high and spun him sideways. He dropped into a low dip in the dunes and vanished from sight. Ray didn't chase. He came to us instead, weapon up, breathing hard, scanning for the second move that always follows the first. "June," he said. "Talk." "I'm here," June said, voice shaking but intact. "He didn't cut me." Behind us, Winston made a strained sound that was half laugh and half refusal. "I'm not dying on a beach," he said, and it would have been funny if it wasn't so close to being true. Help arrived by water, not because it was fast, but because it was the only way. A small park law enforcement boat came in on the surf line, and a Camden Marine unit followed, plus 2 additional deputies and another medic. They approached like we told them to, stepping only where we stepped, because once you learn the ground is being used against you, you stop treating it like scenery. They stabilized Winston and got him onto a litter with 4 sets of careful hands. He stayed awake, stubborn as a brick, and he gripped my sleeve once as they carried him away. "Don't let him make you hurry," he said. Then they moved him toward the water and out, the boat rocking as they loaded him, June still waving and calling directions like she had to keep her voice busy to keep her hands from shaking. Ray stayed with the evacuation for the first stretch, then returned to me, eyes locked on the dunes. "We still have 2 missing hikers," he said, "and we still have a man on this island." June swallowed hard and pointed inland. "He'll go to the closed service road," she said. "Old structures, places to hide, places to watch." Ray nodded once, and I could see him shifting from rescue to containment in his head. He didn't say it out loud, but the longer a search goes without contact, the more it becomes recovery, and the more every decision carries a different kind of weight. We linked up with park law enforcement at a quick ad hoc command point on open sand. Radios were rechecked. Frequencies were adjusted. The unknown voice stopped appearing once more units arrived, which did not make me feel better. It told me the voice had been tied to opportunity. A deputy who'd arrived later, Deputy Larkin, volunteered to sweep the tree line on the inland side with a park officer, while Ray and I moved toward the service road entrance. June insisted on coming, not alone, not after what happened, but she refused to sit at the beach and wait for the island to finish its day without her. We pushed inland with more people now, but the island did not feel safer. It felt busier, which is not the same thing. More boots means more chances for the wrong step. We reached the edge of an older maintenance area where the vegetation had swallowed the outlines of what used to be normal. A low building sat crooked with a door that didn't close right. Vines ran up the walls like they owned the place. The air inside the tree line was thicker and quieter, and the bugs were louder. Ray stopped short and raised a hand. On the ground near the threshold, 2 items had been placed like an offering. A water bottle with the missing woman's name written on it in marker, the kind of bottle you'd bring for a day hike, and a Park Service keyring with a faded tag. June's eyes fixed on the keys. "That looks like staff keys," she said, and her voice went tight. "Those should not be out here." Ray's jaw flexed. "Either he stole them," he said, "or someone left them where he could." We didn't cross the threshold. Ray angled his view inside from the side, using the doorway as a frame and refusing to give the interior the advantage of our full silhouettes. In the dim, I saw the outline of a sleeping pad, food wrappers, a small pile of belongings. 2 backpacks sat side by side, open, emptied, their zippers gaped like mouths. They matched the description of the missing hikers' packs. Ray spoke without raising his voice. "Where are they?" he called into the building. A soft movement sounded deeper inside, then stopped. Not a rush, not a panic, more like someone shifting weight. June's radio cracked with an update from the beach that Winston was off the island and en route to mainland medical. Then another transmission came in, sharper, from inland. "Officer down," a voice said, and it wasn't theatrical. It was clipped and strained. Ray's posture changed instantly. "Who's down?" he demanded. "Larkin," the park officer said, breathless. "He stepped wrong. He's not responding." We moved, but we moved smart, because moving fast through a trapped environment just gives the environment more chances. We found them near the inland edge of the tree line, where the sand transitions to darker soil and roots. Larkin lay on his back, eyes open but empty. The park officer was on his knees, hands hovering uselessly, because there are moments when even trained hands don't have a job left. The cause wasn't graphic, and that made it worse in a different way. It looked like a sudden collapse, like the ground had betrayed him in a way that didn't leave a neat explanation. A concealed hazard had done exactly what it was designed to do, and it had done it quickly. June made a sound like she was swallowing anger. Ray put 2 fingers to Larkin's neck, then pulled back slowly and looked at me with something like apology, as if any of this had been something he could have controlled. "We mark the area," he said, voice low. "Nobody else steps off known ground. We tighten perimeter." The park officer's eyes were wet, but focused. "He's been steering us," the officer said. "He wants us spread out." Ray glanced back toward the maintenance building, and for the first time I saw something close to fury in him. Not loud, not reckless, but hard. "Then we don't spread," Ray said. "We make him move." We pulled back to a safer line, logged the location, and shifted to a methodical push with people paired and sight lines maintained. Park law enforcement coordinated with the boats to keep the shoreline watched. We established a simple containment plan, using the fact that the island narrows and the routes north are limited. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than letting one man decide where we stepped. We returned to the maintenance building with more units and approached like we were clearing a structure with bad terrain underfoot. Ray called out again. "Come out," he said. "Hands where we can see. It's over." No response. Then a voice came from inside, not the dunes, not the radio, but the building itself. The tone was calm, almost conversational, like a man speaking from a place where he believed he still had leverage. "They walked north," he said. "They didn't listen." Ray kept his voice even. "Walk out," he said. "Hands visible." A pause. Then the man did something that should have felt absurd, but didn't, because by then nothing felt absurd. He tossed a small object out the doorway. It skidded across the dirt and stopped near Ray's boot. A ferry stub, stamped with a date, like a ticket you'd keep as proof you belonged somewhere. The date on it was wrong, not impossible in a supernatural way, just wrong in a way that made your brain stutter. It was dated for the following week, like someone had set the stamp wrong on purpose to make a point. Ray stared at it for half a second longer than he should have. "That's not today," he said. The man laughed once, short and dry, and the sound had no humor in it. Then he bolted out the doorway, not toward us, but past the angle he thought we couldn't cover, trying to reach the tree line and vanish into the same vegetation that had been hiding his work all day. Ray moved, I moved, and 2 park officers moved with us. It wasn't a chase in the heroic sense. It was a short, violent scramble in uneven ground where every step mattered. I cut him off at an angle and drove into him low, putting him into the dirt before he reached cover. He fought hard, not wild, but determined, and I felt the quick flash of a blade in his hand and the heat of fear in my throat. I trapped his wrist with both hands and drove it down until the knife loosened. A park officer kicked it away. Ray cuffed him in a practiced motion, breathing hard, eyes locked and unblinking. The moment the cuffs clicked, the man stopped fighting. He went slack, almost bored, as if the physical part had never been the point. Ray hauled him upright. "Where are they?" Ray asked, and the question had changed now. It wasn't just rescue, it was accountability. The man looked past us toward the north, toward dunes and brush, and a stretch of island that suddenly felt very large. "They're not where you think," he said. Ray's face didn't change. "You don't decide that," Ray said. "We do." We found the missing hikers before sunset, farther north than they should have been, beyond public trails, in a shallow hollow tucked into palmetto. They were already gone. There was nothing theatrical about it, no stage scene, no spectacle, just the blunt reality of 2 people who had been controlled and then discarded. We documented. We recovered. We moved with the careful speed of people trying to beat nightfall and also trying not to make new mistakes. The boats took us off the island before it went fully dark, and I remember looking back at the tree line and feeling irrationally like the island was watching us leave. Winston survived his injury. He never came back to Cumberland, and I never blamed him. Deputy Larkin didn't get that choice, and his death sat heavy with all of us because responders aren't supposed to be the tally. The man's name, in this reconstruction, is Thomas Riker. He had worked seasonal maintenance years earlier, Learned the island's staff patterns. Learned what radios people used. Learned where the blind stretches were. He drifted after he was fired, lived in places people avoid, and then returned to a place he believed still belonged to him. In his pack, they found a programmable radio and a small notebook of call signs and plain language phrases, the kind of phrases that sound official if you say them calmly. That was the lesson that stuck with me. A calm voice is not proof of authority. A familiar channel is not proof of safety. And an island is only contained if the person on it wants it to be. The ferry stub turned out to be a simple thing and still an unsettling one. It wasn't a mystery from the future. It was a deliberate error, a stamp he'd kept from older equipment, set wrong on purpose to make us doubt our own timeline for a few seconds. It worked, and I hate admitting that. The clerk in St. Mary's later insisted the ferry system had changed years ago, and she was right, which meant he'd saved the old stamp and used it like a signature. Ray locked the stub into evidence anyway. I did the same with my notes, not because it didn't fit the case, but because it fit too well with what he wanted, which was to leave behind one small piece that made competent people question themselves. Some cases close clean on paper. Some leave one trace that doesn't matter legally but matters personally, because it proves the person you caught wasn't improvising. He was planning for your habits, your urgency, and your faith in the sound of your own radios.